It's hard to design the perfect overland vehicle. The more we add, the heavier they get. The heavier they get, the more we add to correct it. The question is, how much do you need? So I've come to a point where I need to fix a couple of issues on the Landcruiser 200 series. Firstly, I'm just not comfortable with that spare wheel hanging down at the rear of the vehicle. It's just asking to be damaged before we even use it on the car. And secondly, I need more fuel. I need more fuel not because this cruiser loves to drink, which it does, but because I've got some big trips planned next year and the standard tanks just aren't going to cut it. So these problems started a chain of decisions for new products and a new setup in the rear of the vehicle. And here's how it went. So for those familiar with the 200 series Landcruiser, the spare wheel is kept underneath the rear of the vehicle. It's practical, it's out of the way, and it keeps the weight down low while allowing for the maximum amount of storage inside that rear cargo area. To be honest, it's fine for a standard cruiser and fine for standard driving. But I don't drive at standard tracks, and I definitely don't have a standard cruiser. The tyres I'm running on my cruiser are a BF Goodrich 305/65/18. This equates to just a little under 34 inch. Now being 305 millimeters wide, it still fits into that factory position. However, I've never been comfortable knowing that driving off a step or through deep ruts will expose that sidewall to damage before it's even used. So my task was to get that wheel out and find a new home for it. Sounds simple enough, right? Back in January 2020, I released a video documenting the weights on my Landcruiser 200, and during the brief walk around I said this. And then moving to the back of the vehicle on the exterior, as you can see, there is no rear bar on this vehicle. And the reason I haven't included a rear bar and or side steps is mainly for that weight reason. I genuinely didn't want to add a rear bar to this vehicle, knowing how much weight it would add. And having previously owned a Nissan Patrol with a dual swing-away rear end, I knew how annoying it was when you just wanted to grab one thing quickly from the rear cargo area. So I considered everything. I thought about putting some fuel storage on the roof and just leaving the tyre where it is, or maybe even adding some fuel storage around that spare tyre. I thought about removing the spare tyre and putting that on the roof and then putting a long-range tank in. I also considered putting a long-range tank in and not even carrying the spare at all from day to day around town, but then just putting the tyre on the roof for long trips. But I think it was only a matter of time before I realised that the only feasible and sensible option was to install some sort of wheel carrier on the back of the cruiser. So now that I decided to go ahead with this, I had to choose a product and a brand. And there are so many to choose from your big four-wheel drive brands to your specialised steel fabricators and even your backyard fabricators. But one thing I found that was consistent was the price. These bars and carriers are expensive. So I did as much research as possible. I looked over all the forums and I came up with a product that I thought was going to work really well for me, and that's this. A standalone spare tyre carrier on a swing-away mechanism from Kmart. Kmart is a renowned company here in Australia with a history of quality and reliability, which was a first tick from me. The ability to fit this tyre carrier without the need for a full wraparound steel bar was another big tick for keeping the weight down. And the clean and tidy aesthetics and looks of this unit were enough to push it over the line. The rear wheel sits nice and close to the back of the vehicle, and that swing-away mechanism integrates nicely into the position where the old reflector used to be. It's almost perfect, except for those lights and the cutout where the old reverse sensor used to be. But as we said, everything is a compromise. So the wheel was out, safely secured up onto that tyre carrier, which leaves a huge void of space behind the rear axle underneath the vehicle. All that's left there now is a small 45 litre sub-tank above where that spare tyre used to fit. So now I had to decide what I'm going to fill that void with. Now it didn't take long to narrow my choices down to two popular long-range tanks on the market. The first one being the ARB Frontier tank and the second one being the Long Ranger tank. Now these two tanks are very different in their constructions and they have their own set of advantages and disadvantages. The Long Ranger tank is more of a traditional styled tank, made from a steel construction. It's strong and it's heavy duty and it has integrated baffles to stop excessive movement within that huge tank, but also maintain a supply of fuel around the pickup unit. It also comes with a drain bung as well, so if you pick up dirty fuel or accidentally fill it up with petrol, A quick removal of that bolt and you can empty the tank while it's still in place. Now, one of the biggest advantages to the Long Ranger is the options you have. You have a 180 litre diesel replacement tank, a 90 litre high clearance tank, a 70 litre tank that fits around the spare wheel in its factory position, and a 122 litre and 55 litre diesel water combination tank. You also have the option, if you want to upgrade the bottom panel of the tank to a heavy duty 4mm thick steel, which not only makes it incredibly strong, but also a little bit heavier. Now, saying that, there are some disadvantages with the Long Ranger tank. And that is A, it is heavy. Being a steel construction is going to add weight to your vehicle. The second one is its susceptibility to a little bit of damage. If you hit this tank, it's going to dent and maybe even rupture depending on the impact, and it may risk fracturing or breaking some of the welds for the brackets that hold it in place. Now, on the other side, we have the ARB Frontier tank, and this is a completely different style of tank with its own set of advantages and disadvantages. This tank is made from a 7 to 9mm thick polymer material, which is completely seamless and integrates nicely into the back of the vehicle. The fact that it's made of this material means it can withstand impact very well and retain its shape. It also means that it's a lot lighter than a traditional styled steel tank. However, there are some disadvantages with this as well. Firstly, there is no welded bung into the tank, which means if you pick up dirty fuel or accidentally fill the vehicle with the wrong fuel, you have to remove that entire tank and have it cleaned out of the vehicle. Now, the other consideration is that there are no internal baffles, so if you have 90 litres in a 180 litre tank, it will slosh around from side to side and back and forward as the vehicle moves around. Now, from the research I've done, this hasn't seemed to cause too much of an issue, but it's definitely something you want to keep in mind. And the last drawback for the ARB Frontier tank is the lack of options. It only comes with that 180 litre diesel replacement tank. So with all this in mind, I had to make a decision, but I also had to take into account that I'm fitting some aftermarket componentry like a 2-inch lift and also a larger exhaust with 4-inch tailpipe at the back. And this is something that both the Long Ranger and ARB said their tanks would work with, but it's something I wanted to keep a close eye on during the installation. So with all this considered, I had the Long Ranger tank fitted. The internal baffles and the drain bung were two big selling points for me, but the list of options meant I could get exactly what I wanted, and I had the 122 litre, 55 litre diesel water combination tank fitted to my vehicle. Now, 122 litres in that rear tank with a 93 litre main tank meant I had a total of 215 litres of diesel on board, which is going to be plenty. There are a few times where you're going to need more than that when travelling around Australia. However, when you're out on an Australian outback trip, you almost always need water, and having 55 litres integrated into underneath the vehicle and out of the way is going to be very, very handy for almost every trip that I go on. I did not opt to go for the extra heavy duty bottom panel, as I just don't think I'll need it with the additional clearance I've gained. But there is no doubt that this tank is made of quality construction. It uses almost every square inch of space in that void where that spare tyre used to fit, and integrates perfectly around that large 4-inch aftermarket exhaust. Now, for the Long Ranger to have these tanks work together, they're built separately. This diesel tank is built from a steel, whereas the water tank is built from a 304 grade stainless steel. They're brought together and fit together like a puzzle piece, being glued together with a polyurethane glue, which allows for thermal expansion in the metal, but also prevents any dirt and debris from entering in between that gap. Now, the water tank is placed on top of the diesel tank with a small visible section on the rear of the unit. This is also where there are two fitted 1/4-inch national pipe threads, or NPT fittings, allowing access to that water from the rear of the vehicle. Having those threads or access points down low on the water tank also means that you can really maximise the use of that 55 litre capacity. This tank really has solved both my issues. Not only have I managed to get some extra fuel on board with a bit of water, but I've also increased the ground clearance at the back of the vehicle. I've increased that ground clearance from 320mm at the front to 400mm and 450mm at the rear to 530, and there is no hang below that rear bumper. So I've had this tank fitted for 4 months now, and it's met all of my expectations. Despite having modifications like a 2-inch lift and a large exhaust, nothing has rubbed, scraped, rattled or broken in various terrains, which is a real credit to the engineers who designed this tank. But I wasn't finished yet. So it was starting to look good. We had that wheel up and out of the vehicle and safely secured onto the tyre carrier. We now had extra fuel supply and some onboard water as well, all integrated very nicely into underneath the vehicle. But I wanted quick and convenient access to that water. Like I mentioned, the water tank comes with a couple of 1/4 inch MBT fittings, and one of them comes standard with a very basic manual ball valve allowing gravity fed water supply. But I want to go a little bit further than that because this area is a little bit hard to access when the tailgate is down, and it's often covered in mud and dirt when you're off four-wheel driving. I used a series of 16mm PEX hoses to plumb the water over to the driver's side of the vehicle and up into the cavity behind the plastic bumper. The same hoses I used in my water pump project. They are strong, thick, food grade safe, UV protected, and use an easy push connect fitting. The inlet hose was fed up into the vehicle through a large grommet and into the driver's side wing cavity where it's strained and pumped through a SureFlow 4009 12-volt water pump. This is a reliable pump, pushing 11 litres per minute and only using a few amps of power, which is why it's used in all Jayco caravans and also why I used it in my 12-volt pump box project and in this project. The outlet hose is then redirected back through a tank flow meter and then through the same rubber grommet into the cavity behind the bumper, where it then transitions into a thick, kink-proof and food-grade flexible hose to pass through the swivel mechanism on the tyre carrier, transitioning back into a short section of PEX hose before terminating in a standard A-frame caravan water tap. The tap mounted to the very end of the tyre carrier ensures no structural strength is lost in the frame, but also provides a very solid and convenient area to access my water. One of the best advantages is to mounting it out here is you don't have to be close or crashed beside your vehicle to access your water. And this is accessible from both when the car's packed up, but also when we have our full kitchen setup. Reaching across our slide out bench or just walking around the slide out table, water is easily accessible in almost all packed up or set up scenarios. When packing up your vehicle to leave camp, the swing away tyre carrier is often one of the last things packed away, so you can pack up, wash your hands, and you're ready for a day on the road to your next destination. The tap is just like a normal garden tap, so a standard adapter can be used for hose connections. I've been using a generic coiled hose with an adjustable trigger sprayer, which covers just about all of our needs and provides really good pressure. In addition to the plumbed water system, I've added another basic 1/4 inch MPT ball valve, which provides access to the tank in the rare case of electrical or pump failure. The flow is slow as not to waste water, but could be a lifesaver in the case of an emergency. So I wired the pump into the last 12-volt switch blank remaining on my driver's side wing kit on my draw system. Now the two greatest things about this particular pump is firstly it's self-priming. So if you do get a little bit of air in the system, when you run that tank nice and low, filling it back up again, turn the pump on, it's going to be able to source that fresh water and bring it back up without having to manually prime it. And the second reason, it has an auto cut-off pressure switch at 45 psi, which means I can turn this pump on and leave it on, and providing there's water in there and it's pressurized, it's not going to be running consistently. So I can forget about the tank, or I can accidentally leave it on while we're driving, and it's not going to cause the pump or any of the system any damage. Now another great thing about this pump is it is rubber mounted. So although it makes a little bit of noise when you're right up close to it and it's exposed, when fitting the wing kit and all the gear on top, it's much quieter. And from about a metre away, it's barely noticeable. The other thing you need to take into consideration if you're looking at one of these diesel water tank combinations is there is no way of telling how much water is remaining in that 55 litre water tank. So as mentioned in one of my previous videos on my Emu-Wing storage custom box, I've fitted a digital flow meter to the outlet side of that pump, and the gauge is mounted up here to an accessory panel mounted in this box. This means that as the pump activates and water passes through that flow meter, it's going to deduct the amount of litres from a predetermined set level on this gauge. This means that this gauge should be accurate regardless of the uneven terrain the vehicle may be parked on, and it also comes with both an audible and a visual alarm when that water level gets low. The filler hose is discreetly mounted in the engine bay, just near the air filter box. It's easy to access, out of the way, and protected from theft or damage. I generally fill this tank with filtered water using food grade hoses, and the fact that we're using a 304 grade stainless steel means there's no plastic taste in the water, so it's perfect to drink, cook, or wash. Up until having this tank mounted, I've been using 2 20-litre jerry cans mounted in the rear of this cargo area to carry my water around. Now, although it works, it is nowhere near as convenient as having a tap mounted to your drawbar and pressurized water on demand, let alone I've got that extra 15 litres of capacity. Now, there are a few things you need to consider when fitting long-range tanks to your vehicles, whoever the manufacturer and whatever your setup. Probably the most important one are weights. These tanks are heavy, not to mention all the fuel and all water that you're adding to the vehicle as well. Now last year I documented the weights on this cruiser, and it is very, very heavy. There is absolutely no doubt that if I were to add this tank to a stock car without a GVM upgrade, it would send it well and truly over that stock GVM. So if you're thinking about fitting a long range tank to your vehicle, know your weights, have your car weighed, and consider a GVM upgrade or the correct suspension setup for your vehicle. And this brings me on to the next topic, and that is the effect that this is going to have on your vehicle and your suspension, and the importance of having your suspension set up correctly. Regardless of whether or not you have a GVM upgrade, you're going to need to make sure your vehicle handles well, predictable and accurate on-road and off-road. Adding this much weight to your vehicle will definitely affect the way it handles and the feel of the vehicle. So in the case of my vehicle here, I'm running 400 kilo constant springs, assisted by internal airbag helper systems, which enable me to control the stiffness or the pressure within those bags and the way in which the vehicle handles under varying different weight conditions. Now I've done some videos on that in the past, so I'm not going to go over all of the details here. However, when I go to a servo, add about 150 kilos of weight in the form of fuel or a bit more, and then load the car up to go camping all at once, the suspension is going to compress and become a little bit bouncy or plush on the road. Adding some air into those airbags, I'll be able to bring that pressure up, add some stiffness to the springs and bring that ride height back up again and provide nice predictable and accurate on-road handling and secure off-road comfort and feel as well. Now the last point to consider is your fuel gauge. If you're not running some sort of aftermarket fuel gauge like an ultra gauge to determine how many litres are left in your tank, the stock fuel gauge is likely not to be accurate as it were before the tank was fitted. Although something like the Long Ranger does come with a new sender unit and float, it's still not 100% accurate like it would be from factory. In my case, I appear to be able to do about 200 kilometers of driving before the needle starts to move off full. Once it starts to move, it's fairly accurate as if it were from factory. However, it's something you've got to keep in mind, and it's going to take a few tanks to adjust to know how many kilometers you have left, depending on where that needle's sitting. So there you have it guys, that's how I've managed to safely secure my spare tyre, add significant distance to my fuel range, and integrate onboard and very convenient access to that onboard water all inside my Landcruiser. Now it goes without saying, I've definitely added some weight to the vehicle, although I've tried to keep it at a minimum, but I don't ordinarily drive from day to day around town with 215 litres of diesel on board. And I'm only going to be utilising that long range diesel tank when the fuel is hard to come by, the quality is questionable, or the prices are just really, really high. So I'm going to be trying to keep that day-to-day weight down. Personally, I think it's time to take this Landcruiser back over the weighbridge again and see how heavy it is with all the mods to date. So if you're interested in that video, check a comment in the description below. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope I was able to provide you with some ideas that you might be able to take home and use on your own tourer. If you like this video or you think I can improve this system in any way, make sure to chuck a comment in the section below and let me know. But thanks for watching all the way to the end, and we'll be sure to see you in the next video. Cheers.